Sandra Michaels cherished the evening shift at Poppy's Café, a quaint diner nestled in the quiet suburbs of town. 28, she had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the place, regulars occupying their favorite booths, retirees swapping stories over steaming mugs of coffee, and the faint hum of the radio filling the cozy silence. For Sandra, it was more than just a job. It was her sanctuary, a peaceful retreat from the chaos of the outside world. But on this particular evening, as the clock ticked closer to closing time, the atmosphere shifted. The usual clinking of plates and quiet chatter was interrupted by the chime of the doorbell. Sandra glanced up from the counter, ready to greet whoever had wandered in, and froze. Standing in the doorway was someone she never imagined would set foot in a small-town diner, Elon Musk. Sandra blinked, sure her eyes were playing tricks on her. Yet there he was, the man whose face she'd seen countless times on TV and social media, walking into Poppy's like any other customer. His presence seemed surreal, his global influence starkly contrasting with the modest glow of the cafe. He looked tired, as though carrying the weight of the world, but an air of confidence surrounded him nonetheless. After a quick scan of the room, Elon offered a polite nod to a few curious onlookers and took a seat at a booth near the window. Sandra's heart raced as she tried to regain her composure. "Sandra? Everything okay out there?" Mr. Smith, the cafe owner, called from the back. Yeah," she replied, her voice a little shaky. Taking a deep breath, she approached Elon's table. Should she acknowledge who he was? Would that be awkward? Deciding to treat him like any other customer, she offered a warm smile. "Good evening. What can I get you tonight?" "Just a black coffee. And maybe a slice of pie, whatever kind you have," Elon replied, his tone polite but weary. "Coming right up," Sandra said, her nerves settling slightly. As she poured his coffee and plated a slice of apple pie, she couldn't help but notice the murmurs among the regulars. Returning to Elon's table, she placed the items down with practiced ease. "Enjoy," she said with a smile. "Thank you," Elon replied, taking a sip and gazing out the window, lost in thought. The murmurs in the cafe grew louder. Frank, a retired construction worker notorious for his blunt opinions, leaned toward his table mates. "A guy like him doesn't belong here," he muttered loud enough for Sandra to overhear. "Why not?" one of the others asked. "Because people like him only care about money and power," Frank replied dismissively. Sandra focused on wiping down the counter, trying to ignore the comments. But when Frank stood up and approached Elon's table, unease churned in her gut. "Excuse me," Frank said gruffly, crossing his arms. "You're the guy who helped start OpenAI, right?" Elon looked up calmly. "That's correct. So why'd you leave? And now you're starting your own AI thing? Seems a bit contradictory." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the unfolding confrontation. Elon set his coffee down and replied, "I left because I had concerns about the direction OpenAI was heading. I wanted to create something more transparent, aligned with truth and accountability. That's why I started as transparent." Frank scoffed. "Sounds like you just didn't get the control you wanted, so now you're making your own version to rake in more money." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the cafe. Elon's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "It's not about money or control," he said steadily. "It's about ensuring AI is developed responsibly. AI is one of the most powerful tools humanity has, and I believe it's my responsibility to contribute to its safe development." From behind the counter, Sandra couldn't stay silent. Her heart pounding, she stepped forward. "Frank," she said firmly, "you may not agree with his choices, but dismissing his efforts as selfish isn't fair." Frank turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "And what do you know about it, Sandra?" "I know that technology moves forward whether we like it or not," she replied. "At least he's trying to make it safer. That's worth something, don't you think?" Her words hung in the air, drawing mixed reactions. Some regulars nodded reluctantly, while others frowned in disapproval. Mr. Smith emerged from the back, his expression stern. "Sandra, what's going on here?" "I was just defending Mr. Musk," she said, quieter now. Mr. Smith shook his head. Our regulars are the backbone of this place. We can't afford to alienate them over this. I think it's best if you finish out the week and then move on. I'll find someone else to take your place. Sandra's stomach dropped. Café was her refuge, her income, her second home. And now it was slipping away. The next day, she returned to finish her final shift, her spirits low. Halfway through, the familiar chime of the doorbell sounded. She looked up to see Elon Musk entering again. The room fell silent as he took the same booth by the window. "Good afternoon," she said, trying to sound neutral. "Can I get you something?" "Just coffee, please," he replied with a small smile. As she placed the coffee before him, he looked up. "Sandra, I want to thank you for standing up for me yesterday. That took courage." She shrugged, blushing slightly. "I just said what I believed." He nodded. "And that's rare. After I left, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I spoke to my team and we'd like to offer you a job at my foundation." Sandra stared, stunned. "A job?" "Yes," he said warmly. "It won't be glamorous, but it's meaningful work. I think someone with your heart and integrity would be a great fit." Tears welled in her eyes. This wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "I'd love to." As Elon left the cafe, Sandra felt a renewed sense of hope. An ordinary shift had turned into a life-changing moment, reminding her that standing up for her beliefs could open doors she never imagined.